Lost Girls began as a serialized comic in the 5th issue of the adult periodical Taboo in 1991. Most of the strips in Taboo were horror and were illustrated in this sort of edgy, monochromatic style by S. Clay Wilson, Steve Bissett. But your strip with Melinda was far more, full colour in a fully illustrated style. I mean, was that a conscious attempt to do something different to the rest of the content, or did the publishers approach you with they wanted that kind of material?
Well, I think that what happened, as far as I can remember, the early days of Taboo, Steve Bissett was getting a anthology magazine together, and I'd done a little story with Bill Ray, who I believe did a lot of work on Ren and Stimpy, from what I hear. But I'd done one for the first issue, and then when I was thinking about From Hell with Eddie Campbell, we decided to serialise that starting from, I think, the second issue or something like that.
Yeah.
And when I began to think about doing work with Melinda, this was, it was actually not connected with Taboo. There was another publication that was supposed to be coming out over here that was called, I think, Lost Horizons of Shangri-La.
Okay.
And was supposed to be an erotic anthology.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd approached both me and Melinda separately to do an 8-page piece for it. And Melinda had been writing and drawing her own work for years over there on the West Coast.
Right.
But I am a bit like a Dalek in that I am immensely powerful but can't really go upstairs. It's sort of, I have to have an artist that I can work like a glove puppet.
Yeah.
And sort of in order to get anything done in comics. But I'd wanted to use Melinda as an artist because I'd been a huge fan of hers for decades. And Neil Gaiman, I think, put us in touch with each other. And she came up to Northampton for a couple of weekends, and we were just talking about what we did and did not want to do with erotic comics. I mean, once I'd seen Melinda's colour artwork, which I hadn't seen before that point, I realised that this had probably got to be in colour. We started to knock ideas back and forward, and when we arrived at the idea of Dorothy, Wendy and Alice, we realised that this was probably going to be a much bigger story than the 8 or 16 page original inclusion in this anthology, which fell by the wayside anyway.
Yeah.
But by that time I started to think that, well, Taboo is the title of Steve Bissett's magazine, and after talking to him at that time, he said that he'd meant that to be all inclusive.
And not just horror.
Not just horror. So I thought, well, why don't we try putting Lost Girls in there as a stark contrast. And we ran it in there for 3 or 4 episodes, I can't really remember now.
I think it was 5 chapters over 3 issues.
And it took us, I mean, we went through 3 publishers in the course, at least 3, in the course of doing Lost Girls. They were just dropping like flies all around us. This wasn't a direct cause and effect relationship with them publishing Lost Girls. It was forces in the industry, things like that. But we had an awful lot of publishers just kind of collapse under us.
Right.
And for a number of years it was me financing the continuation on it, just because it was something that had to be finished, you know, and that situation went on. I knew that somebody would pick it up eventually, because it was looking like such a wonderful piece of work. And but then Chris Staros stepped admirably into the breach, and it's been relatively plain sailing ever since.
Brilliant. Well, the things, I mean, if Taboo had continued indefinitely, and you'd done a couple of chapters, say, every 6 months, it would have taken about 7.5 years to produce the whole comic. But in fact, it's taken twice that long. I mean, has that kind of been a blessing that it's given the two of you a lot longer to kind of refine the book into the version you ultimately wanted?
I think that, I mean, Taboo, it didn't last very long, and that was because, not because necessarily of just of Lost Girls, but a lot of the other people, it took them a long time to do the work as well.
Right, yeah.
And I think that, yeah, I mean, if we'd known back then that it was going to take us 16 years or whatever it took us, I like to think that we'd still have gone for it, because it was such a good idea, and we wanted to be the first people to do it. And so, and in a way, it's turned out very well, the fact that it has taken 16 years, because eerily enough, if we'd left it any longer, or if we'd finished it a little earlier, if we'd finished it a little earlier, there would not yet have been the reproduction techniques that would have been capable of reproducing Melinda's artwork with the kind of fidelity that we see in the Top Shelf volume. If we'd left it any longer, there would not have been the drums for actually photographing artwork of that size. I mean, hardly any comic artists these days work on Bristol board anymore. They mostly work on computer.
Really?
I mean, I don't think that there are any more Brian Bolland originals. I don't think there have been for about 10 years, other than printouts. I know that Kevin works on board, Kevin O'Neill and Melinda, but it's a rare thing, an increasingly rare thing, and it was very gruelling for Melinda coming down here and bringing the artwork with her for weeks, it seemed like, to get it photographed at a very nice little studio called Orange, where they had still got these old drums where you can actually photograph artwork of that size. But if we hadn't have sort of fallen in that particular niche, it would have been a different story. So it's kind of, and also, if we'd have come out, say, 5-10 years earlier, under a Clinton administration, the world would not have been at peace, but it would have been relatively peaceful.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are emerging at in the middle, well, charitably the middle, probably at the beginning of this Iraq bloodbath, the fact that that is happening, it makes the real stuff that Lost Girls is actually about a lot more important, a lot more pointed. I mean, like, because Lost Girls is very much pro the human sexual imagination, and it's also got a fairly heavy anti-war subtext. I mean, it is very much, as are me and Melinda, we're products of the 1960s, and I mean, I remember, well, that was it. We said if we just bought ourselves a badge making machine 16 years ago, we could have saved ourselves a lot of trouble. You know?
Well, I mean, one of the other benefits of the top shelf version compared to the original version in Taboo is that, like you were saying, Melinda's colours seem a lot more vibrant in the new version, but also subtler at the same time. And also it's been relettered in the sense that you have different voices in the story, and they have different fonts that are representing each one.
To a certain degree, with the fonts, I mean, it's kind of, I think that the font that's used throughout in the dialogue was specially designed for Lost Girls by Melinda and our letterer, Todd Klein. And this font now exists. It's called TK Gebby. and sort of he just combined his initials with her name, and it was based upon, we looked at a lot of old Edwardian books, and we thought we didn't want something that was too fancy, because when you've got male characters talking, it would have looked perhaps a bit wrong, or would have given the wrong kind of intonations. But we thought with that one, it was a nice balance. It was kind of an Edwardian, it's got an Edwardian stiff upper lip to it, but it was quite delicate, quite feminine. So, I mean, the main thing that we differentiated the characters with was the use of the motifs.
The framing of the panels as well.
Yeah, the framing of the panels. I mean, like in all of these bits of Dorothy's Kansas history, you've just got these wide panoramic horizontal shots, you know.
Yeah.
And whereas for the Wendy sequences, it's very upright. It's like the bars of a Victorian Park railing. Everything's very enclosed within these black borders.
Yeah.
Very repressed, you know. And for Alice, we've just got these kind of ellipses that have always generally got an image of reflection in them. Like the Dorothy ones have kind of, they've got their elements and their kind of colour scheme and approach. The Wendy ones have sort of generally got shadows all over them. The Alice ones have reflections. They were kind of motifs that we wanted to use for each of the girls, and of course their actual voices, the way that they talk.
Yeah.
You know, sort of, yeah, I mean, it was very fully realised, the entire project, and I remember when we first approached Chris Staros, I remember him asking, how would you like to see this book produced, which is entirely the wrong question to ask Melinda.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that was it. I mean, sort of, but, I mean, he perhaps swallowed hard when she said, yes, we would like it all like this, but he said, well, we'll see what we can do. The only thing that Chris wasn't able to do was that, I think it was me who suggested this, I suggested the book might be perfumed. And if he could have done it, then he would have done, but he said that there was no perfume where they were certain it wouldn't discolour the paper. So we went, he got some very high quality paper, which actually, to my mind, smells better than the finest Chanel. You know, you can really bury your face in Lost Girls, and it's such a great quality paper. It adds to the experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still get a frisson reading those old Titan reprints of 2000 AD. There's something about the ink they use that's really evocative.
Absolutely.
Another question about the going from a serialized comic to one that comes out as a sort of 3-volume epic. Presumably that then means you don't have to worry about hitting the 6-monthly deadlines. You can think more about the complete work.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, like, when we originally structured Lost Girls, we were originally thinking, well, there isn't anywhere where we could bring out a work like this as a whole thing, and it would be best if we could finance it by making it episodic, so that we could finance it as we went along.
Yeah.
But I don't know, you know, the sort of, we originally thought that, well, there's a lot of foreign anthology magazines. Anthology magazines seems to be the main places that we could probably serialise this. So why don't we structure this so that it is in 8-page instalments, so that there are 10 instalments to a volume, and that there are 3 volumes. And that seemed to work. It gave us 240 pages. So it also kept it tight, because I'd noticed when I was doing Halo Jones for 2000 AD that there was something very good about having to deliver it in 5-page chapters, because you had to make each chapter perfect in itself, so that it actually worked as a standalone thing. And that was good. That encouraged us to try and make each chapter of Lost Girls something that stood alone, that had got its own kind of special features, or sort of its own approach, you know. And that, I think, yeah, we'd got the whole thing structured from the very beginning, but the kind of coloration of it, the tone of it, we were able to sort of keep that polished to a fairly fine lustre all the way through by doing it in these small groups. And of course, Yes, I mean ultimately it was meant to be seen as a 3-volume book. So this is the way that it is from Top Shelf is the way that it was always meant ultimately to be.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, doing a 300-page graphic novel with another person is obviously very much a labour of love, but in this sense it's both meanings of that phrase, because you and Melinda developed a relationship as it was going on.
Well, yeah.
I mean, as this interview is going out on Valentine's Day,
Oh,
you know,
well.
got to talk a bit about...
Valentine's message for everyone then. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd advise everybody to, for the good of their relationship, to actually embark upon a 16-year, very, very complex erotic project. It doesn't hurt, you know. I mean, like, it's often occurred to me that actually Melinda and my relationship, it's benefited immensely from Lost Girls, because from the very first, even when we barely knew each other, we were sort of having to be very frank about what worked for us in terms of erotica and pornography. And there's a lot of relationships which can get to their bitter end without either partner having necessarily revealed as much about themselves as that. So that was how our relationship started, with kind of complete sort of sexual honesty and everything like that. And I think that as much as the book has helped the relationship, I think that the relationship has coloured the book, because what was important to us was that Lost Girls, yes, it should be beautiful, it should be colourful, it should be intelligent, but it should also be compassionate, it should be warm, it should be emotionally warm, which is a difficult thing to achieve in pornography.
Well, so much of it is just about the act, not the relationship.
Well, absolutely. I mean, like, and there was a difficult balance to actually, we realised that we had to have an awful lot of the act in there, but we decided otherwise it's not going to work as pornography.
Yeah.
So we decided to kind of ration it. In the first book, there is kind of something sexual every episode. And there's probably something mildly sexual on every page. But
there's sort of the shadows applying
that's
to
it.
the metatext.
But sort of by the second book, we decided to sort of to gradually increase it, so that there's kind of, I mean, by the third book it's every panel. There is something sexual in every panel, because we thought that that's the way that a pornography should, if any genre should, it should build up to a climax, you know, and that was...
well, particularly with using Rite of Spring, you know, as a pivotal moment.
Yeah, I mean, we got the 3 pivotal moments kind of worked out from the beginning, just from looking at the history of that period, and we thought, yeah, Rite of Spring, that'll be fun, in all sorts of ways, that'll be tremendous. And then the episode at the end of book 2, where you've got the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the emperor, not the archduke, not the contemporary band, sort of. But you see, I'm here. I can make modern references with the best of them.
That'll be in the Extraordinary Gentleman when you get to the end of the century.
but it's yeah, you know, we'd worked out, we'd heard about this island where it was tropical for a few weeks in the year. Although it's surrounded by snow-peaked mountains, there is this tropical island apparently. And so we thought, all right, we'll set this kind of encounter between the girls there intercutting with the assassination. And then at the end of the third book, you know, World War One. Those seem like emotionally charged moments to sort of to break the narrative, you know, and we were able to structure it, you know, perfectly.
Yeah.
It's sort of right from the start. We knew pretty much what was going to be on every page. You know.
When it came to collaborating with Melinda as writer and artist, I mean, how much did you kind of influence each other's decisions? I mean, you talk about
absolutely
Dalek and Glove Puppet.
Yeah, I mean, actually think about it, a Dalek wouldn't be very good with a glove puppet, because they've only got that sucker thing and then the egg whisk that fires lightning bolts or whatever, you know. But I mean, like, the way that it actually worked, it was probably one of the most intricate collaborations that I've ever done.
Right.
I mean, like, normally I tend to turn out these gigantic scripts that are like phone directories, which actually crush the human spirit to even read, you know. And Melinda had been used to working as a writer-artist. She'd never read a script before.
Right.
And so she found it a lot easier if I just did a rough thumbnail picture, which I was terribly embarrassed about because they're really sloppy. I can't draw very well. But
I still have fond memories of Maxwell the Magic Cat.
well, you know, I'm all right in my place, but sort of next to somebody like Melinda, you know, my talents are entirely lacking, you know. So, but I did very, very detailed thumbnails of all of the pages, and sometimes Melinda would change them a little bit, but sort of she would be working very closely to the thumbnails that I'd drawn. And in the other sense, the influence that Melinda had upon the writing was incredible. I mean, like, there wasn't a panel, a line of dialogue that I didn't try out on Melinda first. This was one of the benefits of having both a man and a woman involved in the work, because we were able to come up with erotica that hopefully would appeal to both genders, that would appeal to different sexualities. You know, we tried to make it as universal as we could and as accepting as we could.
Yeah. I mean, the other project you collaborated with Melinda on was Cobweb in Tomorrow's Stories. I mean, in that it was very much working in the genre of pulp fiction. And ironically, actually, in the introduction to Taboo 5, where Lost Girl starts, Douglas Winter was talking about The Phantom Lady as being a kind of like challenging erotic strip that he remembered from his youth.
Well, I mean, I suppose that with the ABC strips in general, I was trying to kind of harken back to archetypes, at least in the comic book sense, that no longer really seem to appear in comics, but which I'd always enjoyed.
Yeah.
And we'd thought of various things. I mean, I enjoyed like Kirby and Simon's Fighting American, so we had me and Jim Bakey doing the first American. You know, I'd enjoyed Herbie, and some of that went into Jack Be Quick that I did with Kevin Nolan. But I'd always kind of liked the idea of glamour strips, but they're always generally so empty and vacuous that they're not actually about anything other than the bosom of the heroine, you know. So we were thinking, well, surely you could kind of use a kind of pretty much a cipher, just a sort of an icon like the Phantom Lady, like some of those kind of sexy, diaphanous 1940s comic heroines. But you could actually probably do something quite funny, quite clever, a bit experimental. And I think that Cobweb was probably about the most experimental, outside of perhaps Promethea. I think that Cobweb was about the most experimental and perhaps the most flexible of all of the ABC strips. We had a lot of fun with that, even if we did get continually censored by the thieving robber barons at DC Comics. Sort of, you know, there was the collage episode that Melinda did, which we had to cover up with butterflies, which I thought was quite ironic, because that was, of course, what they put upon Jacob Epstein's statue of Oscar Wilde.
Right, okay.
They placed a butterfly over the genitalia, which Aleister Crowley later stole and turned up, I think, at the Savoy or somewhere, with a cloak on, which when he removed it, he was naked apart from
that butterfly.
This butterfly. And this was at the moment when one of the women dancing there said to her partner, "Who's that man?" And her partner said, "Oh, that's Mr. Crowley. I expect he's being invisible."
Well, and now, I mean, the statue of Oscar Wilde outside Charing Cross Station, people keep on stealing his cigarette. I mean, I don't know what that says about our times.
Well, yeah, I remember that there was somebody who actually protested against that because of the inscription that some of us are lying in the gutters. Some of us we're all lying in the gutters, but some of us are looking up the stars. And there was this somebody
particularly out for today's, you know, celebrity obsessed culture.
Well, yeah, and they were saying, well, Actually, that's not very nice because, like, some people actually are lying in the gutters, which I think they'd understood Oscar perhaps a little too quickly, you know. But yeah, Cobweb was a great strip. We both enjoyed doing that, you know. And it was at the point where Oscar Zarate said, "Look, you better get back to Lost Girls. That's more important."
Yeah.
That
having
Melinda,
too much fun.
Yeah, so that Melinda decided to get back and finish up Lost Girls, and we handed over Cobweb to, you know, people like Dan Darcy, who did a fantastic job on it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting, some of the kind of suggestive black and white art that Melinda did for Cobweb is not dissimilar to the Venus and Tannhauser section in Lost Girls. Almost like that was her first pastiche, so she was still kind of experimenting with it.
Yeah, that's possible. You know, I mean, like I mean, that was her first pastiche, and probably I wouldn't want to say it was the easiest, but it was certainly nowhere near as demanding as the Franz von Bayros stuff at the end, which nearly drove her completely mental. Just all of those delicate lace effects and sort of the ornament and decoration everywhere. You know, no, I thought that she'd done a sterling job. I mean, that was why I decided to include the White Book, because I wanted to actually show how good Melinda was at mimicking other artists' styles, you know. Egon Schiele was, yeah, I wanted to give her a chance to show off a bit, because I didn't think that the black and white books that she'd mostly been in had really done her justice at all, you know.
When it came to the various artists that she was going to homage in the book, did you have a short list that she picked and chose from, or did you definitely know which ones you wanted?
Well, we went through, and there were people that we originally planned to use. I think for the final one, which we decided to go with anonymous, because we thought, well, yeah, he deserves a mention. She deserves a mention. But we were originally going to use Felicien Rops and illustrating poetry by Baudelaire.
Okay.
And Melinda did a couple of great illustrations in the Rups style, but they were, if you're going to do Rups, it has to be kind of rabidly anti-clerical. Fairly rabidly anti-clerical, but that wasn't what Lost Girls was about. And at that particular juncture of the narrative in the last book, I thought it would have been a distraction.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have served any purpose. And Baudelaire's writing, I don't even know whether I could have written like Baudelaire. You know, I mean, Oscar Wilde was difficult enough. You know, that was a nightmare. He was such a smart bastard that every sentence is a beautifully turned epigram.
Yeah.
You know, even if he's just going down the shops of 20 Rothmans to replace the ones that have been stolen from the figures of his statue. You know.
I mean, it's interesting as well, because both with Lost Girls and the Black Dossier, you're pastiching various other writers' styles as well as asking the artist to do that on your behalf. I mean, how much of a challenge is that, other than, you know, Oscar?
Well, I like doing it. I like showing off. I mean, and a lot of the bits in Lost Girls, they vary. They vary in how successful I think I was. Okay. You know, I think I was okay with the Oscar Wilde. The Guillaume Apollinaire, it doesn't actually read much like Guillaume Apollinaire. You know, Pierre Louis, I toned it down because Pierre Louis is a filthy, scatological whoremonger. You know, sort of. We can say that. You know, but I've got a great deal of admiration for him. But I toned it down a little. Okay. You know, whereas in the Black Dossier, I mean, that Jack Kerouac pastiche, how cool is that? You know, and yeah, I mean, obviously it's showing off, doing Woodhouse and Shakespeare and Jack Kerouac.
I particularly like the Woodhouse, I must say.
We had a lot of fun doing that. That was great. You know, it's sort of, and you only have to read a little bit of these authors, and it all comes back to you. Yeah. You can talk in that voice. You know. But I think that the Kerouac piece in particular was one of the best, just in terms of its flow and its kind of bebop kind of stylings. You know.
I mean, when it came to Kevin doing the pastiches in the Black Dossier, I mean, how much of a challenge was it for him to?
Well, I thought that Kevin had probably showed himself
It's
to
astonishing.
absolutely as great an advantage as I had, or if not more. I mean, like, he's doing Gilray, he's sort of doing these kind of pastiches of the great 1950s posh British boys comics with the painted, you know, sort of Wrath of the Gods or, you know, Heros the Spartan or things like that, which he'd got all into the Life of Orlando. The 3D work at the end, which must have been a nightmare. I know that my script pages for that, I mean, it was something like 10 pages of type to describe a 2-page spread, which is like 5 pages of type for every page of the comic, you know. And I mean, and there's still an awful lot of things that Kevin put into the background that I haven't even noticed yet. I had somebody asking me the other day, they were saying that they read the Black Dossier, they really liked the reference to Brazil. And I kind of said,
I didn't write one.
what reference to Brazil was that? And it turns out that there's a little strangely designed snub-nosed car on the motorway. And sort of, this is the car that Jonathan Pryce uses to flee when he's on the run from the authorities. But and a dozen other things like that I haven't even noticed yet. I've spotted most of the things that he's learned. No, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, it really does show the incredible range that Kevin's got. And I mean, I love the Fanny Hill illustrations, you know. That was kind of like Kevin's take on Bayros, you know, sort of. But yeah, I mean, we had a lot of fun, both of us, on the Black Dossier. It gave us a chance to really to show off what the concept of the League could do and what we could do with it as creators. I mean, a bit unfortunate some of the trials and tribulations that have been visited upon the Black Dossier, but you know.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to suggest that maybe you did some of those on purpose just to make it difficult for DC.
No, we didn't do anything.
Right,
it was sort of, I mean, like DC's legal department had cleared it all last summer. They said it was
how
all
inept
fine.
they are.
Yeah, well, I mean, they'd already kind of, they had done things to just irritate us because they don't like us since we're going to be published by somebody else who will treat us more fairly.
Yeah.
But they'd cleared it for publication last summer, and then it turns out that a sweaty third-rate Hollywood movie producer of our former acquaintance, who both of us had previously told never to call us again, because we thought that he was human sewage, basically, you know, and we'd expressed that opinion and told him never to contact us. Apparently in a fit of pique or spite, because Hollywood producers really aren't used to being spoken to like that, you know. It was him, apparently, who had gone in and threatened DC, who are, when it comes to dealing with sweaty third-rate Hollywood movie producers, they are particularly spineless.
Well, I mean, considering that DC is part of the conglomerate time
of the Warner thing, you know, I mean, yeah, so they'd rolled over, and that's what led to all of the messing about and the fact that the Black Dossier is not officially available in England or Canada.
Yeah, and you can't buy it upstairs for $12.99.
You certainly can't.
No, that would be wrong.
That would be wrong.
It seems quite obvious to say, since we're discussing Lost Girls, that sex is an important theme in your work. I mean, particularly more so than other comic book writers, which seems absurd since there's so much sexual tension in books about people in spandex beating each other up. But, ignoring that. A question that I asked you a year ago that I managed to fluff, I'll try and word it a bit better this time, was, for example, in Swamp Thing, when the character goes into space, you use the different alien planets as metaphors for different versions of sexual experience. Like the Blue Planet is a very masturbatory experience. His encounter with a kind of techno-organic asteroid is all about obsessional relationships.
Yeah.
His landing on Ran, I mean, he literally impregnates the entire planet.
Yeah, I mean, like that, I hadn't actually, the final one of those, I hadn't actually meant that one to be particularly sexual, although yes, I suppose, yes, yeah. I can see it now. You don't often realise those things at the time. I mean, the other two, yeah, I mean, like, they were intended to be sexual. And there was an earlier episode of Swamp Thing, the swamp sex issue, the number 34 or something like that, where
that really Orwell's favourite issue apparently.
Well, I mean, I was very pleased with it myself because we were seeing how far we could push the swamp thing as a concept, whether we could take it into these other areas. And I thought, well, if I can do a sex story about a kind of a creature that's made of vegetation in this kind of fabulous psychedelic manner, then, you know, I should be able to handle sort of sex scenes in my other work. I mean, different sorts of sex scenes, but I would always try to work sex scenes in there because if you're trying to create believable characters, then all believable characters have some sort of sexual component, even if it's not expressed.
Oh, exactly.
So I would always make it as much of an element of my characters as, you know, their personalities, the way they acted with other people, or their superpowers. You know, in fact, probably sexuality might be more important than the superpowers.
Yeah.
You know, so this was something that I kind of carried on throughout my early career in Marvel Man, in various other works, and it started to occur to me that it might be possible to do an extended narrative about sex that didn't involve a bog monster or a superpowered being from another world.
Yeah.
You know, radical, I know, but and that was kind of, you know, could I just talk about sex? And also, could I talk about it without resorting to making it a joke or a horror story? Notice that when sex is dealt with in comics, it's generally made to be an element of a horror story, a humour story. Nothing wrong with those things, but they're not...
Well, ironically, the first time you brought out a comic that was particularly controversial was that issue of Swamp Thing where Abby is suffering from post-traumatic stress and sort of wanders around naked, scrubbing herself with, you know, various kitchen implements.
Yeah, they only gave me 2 days to write that one, and that was the one where we lost the Comics Code sticker, so that turned out quite nicely. You know, it's, yeah, you know, it just seems that horror, it's easy to do a sexual horror story because people have got strange, unexpressed feelings about sex. If you can connect up some horror motif like vampirism or something like that to it, you can make people feel uncomfortable. Or, you know, like the route taken by the Alien movies where everything looks like some sort of enormous cock of some variety or other, you know. So that's fairly easy. And of course with humour. I mean, sort of some brilliant pieces by Robert Crumb where, yes, they're full of sex, but it is presented in a humorous way, which actually, generally, when I think of sex, I'm not generally either laughing or screaming. You know, it's not, I don't think most people's experience, it's just about itself. So what we wanted to do was a book where we didn't duck behind any other genres, where we just came at pornography full on and sort of treated that as a genre in itself and tried to work out what its conventions were and then try to apply them in a different way. Pretty much the same as I've done with superheroes and Watchmen. But here we were thinking, oh yeah, well a lot of the stories, they're set in an isolated chateau or something like that, cut off from the rest of the world. That's good, we'll have this hotel, you know, and there's lots of stories where people will tell their sexual histories while in the middle of some sort of sexual belt or other. That's a good little convention, we can use that. And so on, we just sort of built it up from there, really.
But I mean, you know, since we seem to live in an entertainment society where horror and violence is far more acceptable than sex, I think it's indicative, just looking at your comics, for example in Marvel Man or Miracle Man, whatever it was called at the time, your the end of your trilogy is like absolutely horrific scenes of hell on earth. But the issue that caused controversy was when Liz Moran gives birth. You know?
Yeah, what's that all about? I mean, I can remember that when I was originally talking about the birth issue of Miracle Man, and that was the editor at the time, that was at Warrior, and the editor at the time said, so what sort of angle would you be thinking of taking upon this childbirth? And I said, from the front, you know.
Anatomically correct.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way we all came into the world.
Mm.
You know, surely it's not wrong to draw it in a sort of a cheap sort of $1.50 American superhero comic book.
Mm.
That's my attitude anyway.
I'm curious about the relationship between the characters in Lost Girls in the fictional universe and the versions of their stories that we know in this world. Because in the Black Dossier, you have books existing in the world of League Extraordinary Gentlemen which are tales of their exploits, written by famous authors.
Mm.
So when it comes to the books, or rather the play Peter Pan, the books Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz, I mean, off-screen, do Alice, Dorothy meet J.M. Barrie?
No, they're in a different. The two works, even though the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen actually conceptually grew out of Lost Girls,
Yeah.
because we'd had such fun doing three fictional characters in a sex context that I thought maybe this could work as an adventure book.
Yeah.
You know, but they're very separate. I think Lost Girls kind of takes place in our world.
Yeah.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen takes place in a world of fiction.
Absolutely.
But no, I mean, I think that they happen in very different universes. Like I say, the world in which Lost Girls happens is pretty much our world,
Yeah.
with a couple of little flourishes, you know, around the edges. It could have happened in our world,
Okay.
you know. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen all takes place in this kind of world that is like a grand unified field theorem of fiction, where all the stories actually happened. Some of them, the more famous ones, their authors are known as well. But Shakespeare is regarded as the great biographer, and so is Cervantes.
Mm.
You know, and so is Conan Doyle, presumably.
Yeah.
You know, so no, I don't think that our Lost Girls do hang out with J.M. Barrie in some kind. It's a nice idea, I suppose. They'd probably frighten him.
Yes.
You know?
But I mean, at the same time, thinking of your ideas of idea space and how perhaps events that happen in this sort of shared universe leak into our world, if only as inspiration for writers, perhaps.
Sure.
You have these full-page illustrations, these brilliant full-page illustrations by Melinda, where you show iconic scenes from the three novels, but sexualised. So it's kind of like the halfway house between the two.
Yeah, it was sort of. I mean,
they're fantasies, obviously.
Yeah, we kind of we've got those planned at the very beginning. These big silent pages that would just be an image, that would be a key image from one of those books, but sexualised. Some of my favourite images in the books. I mean, the two most telling ones, I think, are in the last book, where you've got the two pages which me and Melinda referred to as the Pussy Gator and the Jabbercock. Where we've got these. I mean, they were horrific pages in some way, and the first reaction of everybody to them is to laugh.
Yeah.
Because they're so absurd, and in some ways they sum up each gender's fears about the other one. This sort of vagina dentata in the Wendy chapter, which it was a great visual metaphor, the way that this paedophile figure, this Captain Hook figure, is kind of swallowed by adult womanhood, the thing that he fears.
Yeah.
And I found out recently that apparently some people who are actually working with paedophiles say that, well, actually it's a misnomer. They're not lovers of children. They're frightened of adults and adult relationships. Okay. They're more reacting, it's more a thing of control. They feel that they're out of control of their lives, that larger forces control them. The only place that they feel safe to put their sexuality is in children. You know, probably the same thing would apply with any other kind of helpless individual. It's sort of, so I think that a lot of the things that just we intuited in the course of Lost Girls, I think that they could have some basis in psychological reality. We even heard about a couple of young women who had themselves been sexually abused when they were children.
Right.
And they were having Lost Girls explained to them by a friend. And she'd said, well, basically, it's these women and the things that have happened to them in their younger days or whatever, they have turned it into a kind of compensatory fantasy. They distanced themselves from it by making it into a fantasy. And both of these women who'd actually suffered sexual abuse said, well, that's exactly what I did. So I guess that must be a fairly common thing. And as I say, it seems that our instincts were right on that one.
Cool. So that I can work our videographer's favourite work of yours into the script. The you that wrote V for Vendetta was obviously an angrier young man than the you who wrote Lost Girls, because that presents a possible future as a dystopia, but one where there's hope at the end. While with Lost Girls presents the past as a utopia, but then ends with a bit of despair as the real world encroaches on it.
And it also does end with a poppy in the last panel, which kind of symbolises, I mean, it's been used to symbolise the imagination, the opium that Alice indulges in, the poppy field where Dorothy has her encounter with the farm labourers, and in the original Wizard of Oz, the poppy field where Dorothy is lulled to sleep. So using that as a symbol in the last panel, it kind of suggests that yes, this is pretty awful, but even in the midst of all this, carnage, the imagination, it does flourish, it does grow. I mean, I'd say that if anything, I am angrier now than when I wrote V for Vendetta, and I'm smarter. It's sort of, I don't think that it is, I don't think that it's at the time, back when I did V for Vendetta, there was a point in shouting fire. Now several burning down around our ears, and it's probably not the most helpful thing to shout. I think that what you need to try and supply to people is, as I tried to do in V for Vendetta as well to a certain extent, it's point out the exits. Try and point out the fire exits to your readership. Try and give them some way out. Never abandon your readers in the middle of a hellish train of thought. So Melinda said that when she first read Watchmen, before she met me, and she thought, this is really gripping, I hope this is not going to end really, really horribly, because, and it didn't. It sort of, it wasn't the bleak, complete end of the world that she'd been expecting. It was different. And your readers have to be able to trust you, that you're not going to do something to them that is absolutely unbearable. Even though I suspect that at various points during From Hell, probably most of my readership had cause for doubt.
In terms of Lost Girls reaching a wider audience, I mean, obviously it's a fairly select group who will buy it because A, it is pornography and you're not embarrassed about saying it is, otherwise other people would package it as erotica, but you diffuse that argument.
Absolutely.
I've not seen the episode of The Simpsons that you're in, but I saw a screen grab from it and you're sitting in front of a poster for Lost Girls.
Lost Girls.
So I was amused
drawn
that
in
you got an
Matt
advert.
Groening style. How cool is that?
Exactly.
I mean, we had a lot of fun doing that, and it was pretty cool to have that poster up on the wall, which is actually an image from Lost Girls, but redrawn. And they've done a really great job of it, Well, the characters are yellow and have got 3 fingers, but other than that, it's sort of, that's got to be somebody's turn on, doesn't it? But I think that the important thing about The Simpsons is that now everybody knows, firstly, just what a incredible rippling physique I have under these clothes, and secondly, that I can fly. These are aspects. These are aspects of my being that I've never sort of emphasised them too much, but it's things that people should know.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure. Good day, my name's Alan Moore, and whenever I'm in London, I like to chill with Ollie and his homeboys down at the London Underground comic store in Camden.
Looks better with two.